I never thought I'd come home to armed guards blocking my own driveway, but there they stood, two men in their 30s wearing black Oakwood Estates security shirts, flanking a massive gate with a bold "No Entry" sign. Behind them loomed a high barrier topped with gleaming barbed wire, cutting me off from my own property. Between them stood the HOA president, a blonde woman around 38 years old, clipboard clutched to her chest, her finger pointing directly at me in defiance. That fence across my family's farm entrance wasn't just a barrier, it was a declaration of war. When they blocked access to my property, I didn't just get mad, I got even in ways they never saw coming. By the time I was finished, their precious clubhouse had become my personal equipment garage, and that was just the beginning of their nightmare. My grandfather's grandfather built this farmhouse in 1895. For 5 generations, the Hayes family had worked this land, weathering dust bowls, depressions, and droughts. The 75-acre farm was my birthright and my grandchildren's future. When Riverwood Estates, a luxury development, broke ground next door 10 years ago, the developers assured us we'd coexist peacefully. For a while, we did. Some residents even enjoyed watching my grandson Ethan learning to drive the tractor or my granddaughter Lily helping deliver calves. Everything changed when Veronica Sinclair, a 38-year-old former corporate executive with 3 HOA takeovers already under her designer belt, moved in and quickly seized control of the Riverwood board. With her perfectly styled blonde hair and ever-present clipboard, she cut an intimidating figure at community meetings. At her first meeting, she declared, "This farm is depressing property values. We need a strategy to address it." My neighbor Mark, a 72-year-old retired judge living in Riverwood, secretly recorded that meeting and warned me, "Jim, they're coming for your land." Veronica's husband, Richard, runs Sinclair Development. They've used this playbook before: harass longtime residents until they sell below market value, then flip the properties for massive profits. I didn't worry too much initially. My farm predated their development by over a century. We weren't part of their HOA jurisdiction. What could they possibly do? I'd soon discover exactly how far they were willing to go. The harassment began with petty complaints, letters about my rooster crowing, my tractor being an eyesore, the scent of manure decreasing property enjoyment. I filed each complaint in a folder labeled HOA Nonsense and went about my business. The situation escalated when my daughter Sarah, her husband Tom, and their 3 children moved back to the farm after Tom lost his job during the economic downturn. Suddenly, our quiet homestead buzzed with life. My 7-year-old grandson learning farming, my teenage grandson fixing equipment with me, 3 additional vehicles coming and going daily. A week later, surveillance photos of my property appeared in Veronica's PowerPoint presentation titled Traffic Hazard Documentation. With clinical precision, she announced, "We've recorded 87 vehicle entries and exits from the Hayes farm this month. This excessive traffic creates noise pollution, safety hazards, and degrades our community's exclusive character." Mark challenged her. "Veronica, that property isn't even part of our HOA. We have no jurisdiction there." Her response was chilling. "Not yet, Mark. Not yet." That evening, Mark brought me a thumb drive containing secret HOA board emails. Veronica's husband, Richard, owned Sinclair Development. They didn't just want to lower my property value, they needed my water rights for their planned luxury resort. Without access to my spring-fed pond, their $50 million project collapsed. 3 days later, surveyors appeared at my property line. When questioned, they refused to identify their client. The certified letter arrived a week later, claiming my driveway encroached on HOA land and demanding immediate cessation. My own surveyor confirmed what generations of Hayeses knew: our driveway was fully on our land. I sent the results with a note: "Case closed." Her one-line reply chilled me: "We'll see about that." The real attack came without warning. While driving Lily to her swim meet, I received frantic calls from Sarah. Workers were building a fence directly across our driveway entrance. By the time I raced home, I was confronted with exactly what would become the nightmare of every homeowner there. It stood, a high metal barrier with gleaming barbed wire strung across the top. A massive gate with a prominent "No Entry" sign blocked our only access road. Two muscular security guards in their 30s, wearing black polo shirts with HOA security emblazoned across them, stood at attention on either side of the gate, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding their eyes. Between them stood Veronica, a woman of about 38, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a crisp blue blouse and designer jeans. She clutched a clipboard to her chest like a shield. As I approached, she raised her arm and pointed her finger directly at me, the universal gesture of, "You shall not pass." Behind the barricades stood my wife Carol, still wearing her hospital bracelet from recent cancer treatments, unable to leave for her medical appointment. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, abandoning my truck and storming toward the barrier. The two security guards immediately uncrossed their arms and stepped forward, creating a human wall. "Sir, this is now a restricted access point. Please step back," the taller one ordered. Veronica barely looked up from her clipboard, her manicured finger tracing some document as she spoke. Then she raised her arm and pointed directly at me, exactly the gesture captured in that moment, frozen in time. "Mr. Hayes, our legal team has determined this access point illegally crosses HOA easement property. Furthermore, the board has unanimously voted that the excessive family traffic entering and exiting constitutes a public nuisance and safety hazard." I thrust my survey documentation at her. "This is my property. You have no right." "Our attorneys have discovered an old township easement from 1967 that supersedes your survey," she interrupted. "This barrier is not only legal but necessary to protect our community." When I tried to reach Carol, the guards physically blocked me. "Sir, residents must apply for access permits, subject to HOA approval. My wife needs to get to her chemotherapy," I shouted. Veronica shrugged. She should have applied for a medical access exemption. Forms are available on our website with a 14-day processing period. As Carol stood stranded on our own property, something in me hardened. This wasn't about property rights anymore. This was about my family's survival. I called Sheriff Brody, a longtime friend, then my niece Jennifer, one of the state's top property rights attorneys. "They picked the wrong day and the wrong farmer," I told Carol across the fence. "This ends now." While waiting for the sheriff, I noticed all construction equipment bore the Sinclair Development Group logo, the same company owned by Veronica's husband. A quick online search revealed their history: 3 communities where longtime residents had been forced out through aggressive HOA tactics, followed by luxury redevelopment projects that tripled property values. Sheriff Brody arrived with 3 deputies, their cruiser's lights flashing. The guards attempted their crossed-arms stance with him too. "Federal criminal obstruction," the sheriff announced loudly, unholstering his handcuffs, plus false imprisonment of a cancer patient. "That's 10 years minimum." The guard's sunglasses couldn't hide their widening eyes. Veronica stepped forward. "We have legal documentation." "Save it for court." Brody cut her off, pointing directly back at her, mimicking her own gesture. "Right now, you're opening this gate or leaving in cuffs." As the guards scrambled to unlock the barrier, Brody personally escorted Carol to her appointment, lights flashing the entire route. Before leaving, he served Veronica with emergency papers, 24/7 unrestricted access pending legal resolution. "Next time, I won't ask before cutting this fence down," he explained, purposely loud enough for neighbors gathering to hear. The look on Veronica's face as her neighbors watched her authority crumble was my first taste of justice, and it was sweeter than I expected. That evening, Mark appeared at my door with a thumb drive. "I've been collecting evidence for months, board meetings, private emails. You need to see this." The files contained plans labeled Riverwood Expansion Phase 3, showing my entire farm converted to luxury condominiums. Emails between Veronica and developers discussed how to pressure the old farmer to sell below market value and referenced the fence strategy as Operation Lockout. Jennifer arrived the next morning and reviewed everything. "Uncle Jim, this isn't just HOA overreach, it's criminal conspiracy, attempted real estate fraud, and potential RICO violations. They're deliberately imprisoning your family to force a distress sale." She pulled out her laptop. We're not just filing an injunction, we're going nuclear. Jennifer orchestrated a comprehensive legal strategy. An emergency injunction demanding removal of the fence was granted within hours. When HOA security initially refused to comply, Sheriff Brody returned with bolt cutters and deputies to enforce the court order. She then filed complaints with multiple agencies: the State Attorney General for real estate fraud, the FBI for racketeering and civil rights violations, the Department of Housing for discriminatory practices, and the State Bar Association against the HOA's attorneys. Her masterstroke came when she discovered the HOA had secured a $4.2 million loan using all community properties, clubhouse, pool, tennis courts as collateral, with Veronica personally signing guarantees without proper board authorization. Despite the injunction, the harassment continued. The HOA replaced the fence with a checkpoint requiring residents to sign in and out. They installed floodlights aimed at our bedrooms and filed false environmental complaints against our farm. The turning point came when Richard Sinclair's former accountant approached us with financial records showing their company was nearly bankrupt, desperately needing my land to secure new investors. The fence wasn't just harassment, it was financial survival for the Sinclairs. Armed with this evidence, we weren't just fighting for our property anymore, we were positioned to end their reign permanently. The courthouse overflowed on the day of our hearing. Every Riverwood resident attended, alongside farmers from surrounding counties who'd faced similar intimidation tactics. I brought something special with me, a large foam board displaying 3 photographs. The first showed the "No Entry" sign and security guards blocking my driveway, with Veronica pointing her finger imperiously. The second showed my wife Carol in her hospital gown, unable to leave for treatment. The third was an empty frame labeled "Justice." Jennifer had advised this visual would humanize our case beyond legal arguments. As we entered the courtroom, I noticed Veronica had undergone a strategic transformation. Gone was the power suit and clipboard. Instead, she wore a modest blue dress, her hair pulled back simply, looking every bit the concerned community volunteer rather than the corporate predator I knew her to be. The 2 security guards who had blocked my driveway sat behind her in business attire, unrecognizable from their previous paramilitary appearance. Veronica arrived with expensive attorneys from a prestigious firm, a team of 6 lawyers in tailored suits carrying matching leather briefcases. Their lead counsel, a silver-haired man named Thornton, immediately objected to my photo display as inflammatory and prejudicial. Judge Eleanor Simmons, a stern 70-year-old with zero tolerance for legal games, overruled him with a single glance and began by addressing Veronica's legal team directly. "Counselors, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence and am deeply troubled. Explain why I shouldn't refer this matter for criminal prosecution." For 3 hours, Veronica's attorneys attempted to justify the fence as a reasonable safety measure within HOA authority. Their arguments collapsed when Jennifer presented the internal documents and emails where Veronica wrote, "The old man will crack when he can't get his wife to cancer treatments. Give it 2 weeks before he's begging to sell." The most devastating testimony came from other Riverwood residents, describing years of intimidation targeting elderly homeowners and families with children. One couple tearfully recounted being fined $100 daily for growing vegetables in their backyard after their retirement savings collapsed. By mid-afternoon, Veronica's legal team was in disarray. Through the courtroom windows, Richard Sinclair paced the parking lot, shouting into his phone as investors abandoned ship. Judge Simmons delivered her ruling with cold fury. "In 30 years on the bench, I have rarely witnessed such calculated cruelty." She ordered immediate removal of all barriers, dissolution of the current HOA board, punitive damages of $2.8 million. Personal liability of $750,000 for Veronica for breach of fiduciary duty, referral of potential criminal charges to prosecutors, and freezing of all HOA assets pending forensic audit. As Veronica collapsed in her seat, Judge Simmons delivered her final blow. "Mrs. Sinclair is prohibited from leaving the state until this matter is fully resolved." We had won completely, but I wasn't finished. The aftermath revealed a community in crisis. The HOA was functionally bankrupt from legal fees. The loan secured by Community Properties was in default. The bank was preparing to foreclose on the clubhouse, that same prestigious building that had been the HOA's pride and symbol of authority, where Veronica had once held court with her clipboard, along with the pool and amenities that residents had invested in. While clearing out my files one evening, I rediscovered that folder labeled HOA Nonsense, containing years of harassment letters. Among them was a glossy brochure from when I'd first met Veronica, showing her standing proudly in front of the Riverwood Clubhouse, clipboard in hand, promoting the exclusive lifestyle the HOA provided. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very symbol of her power would soon be on the auction block. I remembered how she'd once conducted a property values tour for potential buyers, pointing at my farm with that same accusatory finger from the thumbnail moment, telling prospects, "Don't worry, this won't be here much longer." Her clipboard had detailed redevelopment opportunities for my property. Now, the tables were about to turn dramatically. The night before the foreclosure auction, I couldn't sleep. I walked out to where the fence had stood and looked across at the now darkened clubhouse. For a moment, I contemplated simply letting it go, allowing the bank to sell it to another developer, washing my hands of the whole affair. But then I remembered Carol's face behind that barrier, unable to reach her cancer treatment. I remembered my grandchildren being photographed like criminals for simply playing on their own property. And I remembered that pointing finger, so certain of its authority to determine who belonged and who didn't. By morning, my decision was made. Many Riverwood homeowners, mostly retirees who had invested their life savings in these properties, faced financial catastrophe through no fault of their own. They'd been victims of Veronica's scheme too. That's when inspiration struck. I approached the bank holding the defaulted loan. I'd like to discuss purchasing the Riverwood Estate's debt obligations. What the banker didn't know was that Jennifer had negotiated a separate settlement with Sinclair Development's investors for attempted fraud, proceeds that had just been deposited in my account. Days later, I owned the $4.2 million loan secured by all Riverwood common properties. I now controlled the financial fate of the very HOA that had tried to destroy my family. Rather than immediately foreclosing, I called a community meeting. Nearly every resident attended, their faces drawn with worry about losing their amenities. I stood before them, loan documents in hand. Your clubhouse, your pool, your walking trails, they're all collateral on a defaulted loan that I now hold. Nervous whispers filled the room. I could legally take possession tomorrow, convert your clubhouse into my personal garage and equipment storage, just like the title to this very story promises, park my tractors where Veronica once stood with her clipboard, install my own NO entry, sign with my own security guards turning away anyone who approaches. The room went silent. But I won't. Because most of you are good neighbors who are manipulated by corrupt leadership. I proposed restructuring the loan on favorable terms, allowing the community to retain its amenities under one condition: the creation of a new HOA charter with strict protections for property rights, transparent governance, and prevention of the abuse we'd experienced. And one more thing, I added, the clubhouse will operate as a shared community center with programs for both Riverwood residents and surrounding farm families. Relief washed over the crowd. But I had one more surprise in store. The court-appointed interim HOA board accepted my terms immediately. But before finalizing our agreement, I followed through on my promise. For exactly 1 week, I turned their precious clubhouse into my personal garage. The moment was too perfect not to document properly. On a sunny Tuesday morning, I assembled my entire collection of farm equipment: 3 tractors, a combine, 2 ATVs, and various implements. I had custom t-shirts made for my farmhands reading "Farm Security" in the exact same font as the HOA security shirts from that fateful day. Each wore sunglasses and stood with arms crossed at parade rest. I personally drove my largest tractor, a massive John Deere that had belonged to my father, straight through the manicured entrance of the Riverwood Clubhouse. The marble floors creaked in protest as I parked it right in the grand foyer where Veronica had once greeted guests with her clipboard. The chandelier above reflected in its polished green hood, a surreal collision of farm utility and suburban luxury. We stacked hay bales in the meeting room where the HOA board had plotted their neighborhood takeovers. We converted the spa area into a tool storage room. The Olympic-sized swimming pool was drained and lined with canvas, creating a perfect grain storage bin. Most symbolically, I placed my grandfather's antique plow in the exact spot where Veronica always stood during HOA meetings. And most satisfyingly, I hung my own massive "No Entry" sign at the entrance, an exact replica of the one they had placed on my driveway, with two of my farmhands standing guard, arms crossed precisely like those security guards had done. When residents approached, my farmhands would point their fingers exactly as Veronica had done to me, saying, "This is now a restricted access point. Please step back." For dramatic effect, I hired a photographer to recreate the exact image from that day, but with the roles reversed. In the new photo, I stood in the center, holding a clipboard, pointing at a visibly distressed HOA board member who had come to plead for access to retrieve documents. The local newspaper ran both photographs side by side under the headline, "Tables Turned, Farmer Converts Million."